Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah and welcome to Pivot on the Hilal TV channel. Today with me is Anwar Jetam, who studied logistics management at the University of Johannesburg and then proceeded to complete an Alamiya program in Islamic sciences, graduating from Jamia al-Ulum al-Islamiyya. He has an interest in politics and community development and has served in various roles in student leadership. He's also active in civil society and currently is the program manager for civic leadership programs at ASRI. And as you know, I'm fascinated with the youth and the way in which they're engaging this country and the way in which they engage with our society. So it was just apt for me to have Anwar over and to chat a little bit about South Africa, about our elections, and about youth leadership and how it is that the youth envision that this country should go forward. So with that, Assalamu alaikum, Anwar, and thank you for being here.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Shukran jazilan. Thank you for having me.
So Anwar, firstly, explain to us what does ASRI stand for and what is the vision behind the organization?
So ASRI is a think tank. ASRI stands for Owl Socio-Economic Research Institute. It's a think tank that essentially focuses on civil society issues, particularly within the area of socio-economics and politics, government policy studies and training. We are specifically invested in leadership training. So since the year 2016, we've had our flagship program has been the Future Leaders Program, which we've offered at the postgraduate level for young graduates who are very active and passionate about civil society work, about politics, about getting involved in the public sector. So that has been our flagship program. And over the years, we've expanded into other leadership programs like the Civic Leadership Program, which I currently head. And we're also moving into the phase of oversight and accountability training as well.
So as an Oval Social Research Institute, it has an Islamic ethos, it's Islamic based?
So ASRI has a very pluralistic approach to South African civil society, but naturally it is underpinned by Islamic values.
And that's fascinating because I think it's the first of its kind in South Africa and in the Muslim community, right?
Definitely.
It was founded by members of the Muslim community?
Yes, so founded by members of the Muslim community in 2015 who had an idea of how do we contribute to larger civil society issues as South Africans, and coming from our background as members of the Muslim community, bringing in those values, those ethics, but yet speaking to the universal landscape that is South Africa.
That's fantastic. That's really inspiring because I think for the longest of time, the Muslim footprint in South Africa has mostly been in terms of charity work based, not contributing in terms of ideological understanding or social cohesion, things like that. Although charity does contribute to social cohesion, but in the long term, that needs to be more. There needs to be an infrastructure development in terms of how we as Muslims contribute to take this country forward. And now, you being in that unique position of being in an organization like this, one of the youth who is engaging with the youth, do you find that there's an interest amongst the youth to be part of this program and to explore the different questions that come about from an Islamic perspective or from a very diverse organization that has an Islamic ethos?
I think firstly, the Muslim community, just to double back to some of, for example, what we were talking about, the Muslim community has had a very extensive focus on charitable institutions and relief work, humanitarian work. And I think this has made the South African Muslim community to be quite well known and very reputable around the world. This has been a good thing, but let's say the field does suffer from duplications, which result in the unnecessary expenditure and even sometimes wastage of resources, both human and material. But then we have to also talk about in terms of wherever Muslims are located, and within the South African experience, we can talk about being in South Africa. What's your contribution to South Africa in terms of advancing rights, in terms of fulfilling responsibilities as citizens? What education takes a place around it? How do you empower the average citizen that they can engage, let's say, the democratic process of the country? And we know that, let's say, for example, participating as a citizen, being an active citizen, is more than just casting a vote during election time. So we've done that now recently on the 29th of May. But there's post-elections, there's responsibilities that citizens have. So it's about educating the community about those, let's say, responsibilities in terms of active citizenship. Now, the youth participation, now this is very interesting. Unfortunately, we have seen let's say, a decrease in youth participation in civil society organizations. What ASRI has tried to do to rectify that situation has been the development of the Future Leaders Program and our leadership incubator through the Civic Leadership Program. Basically trying to get youth together, conscientize them about civil society issues, and then over a period of time, incubate them so that they become active participants. So this is what we have been doing. But when there are some success stories, alhamdulillah. But what we are also seeing, though, is that nationally much more work needs to be done. So, I mean, there's many partner organizations or organizations that we collaborate with across the spectrum that are also speaking a similar language of bringing youth together and getting them involved in civil society work. So if I can use the example of Defend Our Democracy, we're in a very interesting election observer campaign officially as part of the IEC. Many of the observers were young people. Now that was something very, very positive. And it was good to see that and to participate in that process as well. The sad reality, though, is that there were many young people that chose not to vote. And this year we had, for this election, we did have a case of a huge contingent of first-time voters who would have been young people or who would have been eligible to vote, and they were young people, but many chose not to vote for various reasons. So more work needs to be done.
So again, we find that there's been voter apathy from the youth in the 2024 elections, as there was in 2020 and 2019. One would have thought that perhaps that would have changed by now, and that the youth would be more interested in coming out to vote. There was also a lot more political parties that voters had a choice of choosing from. Is it possible that all the political parties that participated in the elections are not really targeting the youth and empowering them or raising that awareness in the youth on the importance of voting? Or have youth, do you think, honestly feel that the democratic process in terms of elections and just voting is not, is not doing what it should be doing, and that democracy per se, as identified simply by voting, really has no value?
I think it's multi-layered. I think that a lot of young people are struggling to find a political home or political space. Some of the complaints regarding that has to do with the fact that many feel that there's a lot of gatekeeping by elderly political activists that now are well into their 70s, maybe even to their 80s, who are essentially not giving the youth any space. So that's one of the issues. The other thing is that two parties appeal to younger voters, and can they appeal to them in a very credible way? Yeah, there are youth who are stuck in trying to, let's say, reliving the 1970s and the 1980s. But then there's also young people that want relevant representation now in 2024, and they're not necessarily seeing that in political parties. So we did see, if I may mention a political party, we did see, let's say, for example, Rise Mzansi, who tried to capture the youth vote. Initially, that's the way that they presented themselves and projected themselves with very catchy campaigns and so forth. But more needs to be done within the political spectrum to actually capture the youth vote. So we look at, for example, youth participation from 2019 to 2024. That 5-year lead time does not seem like it was used adequately enough. But also we have to ask the question is that before the age of, say, 18, what is being done with young people to educate them about participating in the democratic framework or in the framework of South Africa's young democracy? Because we only leaving voter education to when people are 18. But by that period, their mindsets are already quite solidified, I think. So there needs to be a much more earlier engagement with civil society issues. So I think this is an area that we really need to look at.
You're absolutely right. I think there isn't that visionary understanding that we need to get people politically active before they come of voting age.
Absolutely.
And that, of course, comes back again to then perhaps the curricula, changing the curricula or decolonizing the curricula to make individuals, young people, aware of the importance of a democratic process, different democratic dispensations, and what it will cost them in the long run if the state does not adequately represent them or does not then fulfill the mandate of the populations of that particular country.
I have to agree with that. So, I mean, for example, bringing this on a practical level, it's participation in LRCs in schools, encouraging participation. And even if, for example, a learner does not necessarily want to be on the school's learner representative council, but they should be allowed to vote for their leaders at school. And maybe it needs to be mandatory that every student must vote. And the IEC needs to come into high schools and officiate elections. So we get into this mode of our vote does count. The young LRC leader at a particular, let's say, high school is someone that you should know, you should engage them with if you are in that school. You should ask them all the tough questions. What are you going to do to get our lunch break extended? You know, as an example, it may seem very, very playful, but that's part and parcel of, let's say, being educated about how the process works. From a young age, for example, that everybody's opinion does count, but also your opinion is only going to be valuable if it's an informed opinion. I think one of the critiques of democracy sometimes is that whether an opinion is educated or not, it's all the same, but we know realistically that shouldn't be the case. So if we're going to vote, we need to know why we're voting, who we're voting for, what do they stand for. And if the earlier we teach that, the better. But beyond voting, if we can look at, for example, not just looking at community service just to get enough points to get into university, but community service as part and parcel of actually giving to society. You know, that it's part and parcel of one's identity. It's a reflection of their values, their beliefs, their ethics, contributing to society. I mean, for example, we see there are certain communities in the country that seem to have this idea of we just need to protect our privileges and our rights as opposed to we need to contribute to the country. Now, that requires a change in mindset.
You raised some excellent points, and I want to come back to that when we come back from the break. But for now, we're just going to the break, and when we come back, I'm going to continue my conversation with Anwar. This is really fascinating. We'll see you after the break. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the second segment today with my very dynamic guest, Anwar Jetam, who is the Programs Manager for Civic Leadership Programs at ASRI, and we're talking about youth participation, youth voting, and of course the contribution that the youth have to make towards this country. Now, Anwar, you raised some very interesting points in the last segment, and what I want to touch on is this realization that when you're voting for somebody, you said that in the schools, etc., they should choose people with integrity and with character and be able to justify that. On its own, that is a brilliant idea because you're already then attuning the mindset to what are the values that you expect in a leader. And for younger people, it's easier then to teach them about honesty, integrity, individuals who will contribute towards, you know, whatever issues that they have, etc., so that they don't get caught up when they in the big world and then, you know, look at the class materialism or look at the false promises of the different political parties. So you're shaping a particular value system in the young people, and that's what we need to reorientate our society towards more ethical leadership, which is missing today. So now at ASRI, do you focus on ethical leadership?
Absolutely. So the core of the Future Leaders Program, and by extension, even the Civic Leadership Program. So the Future Leaders Program is a four-month theoretical intensive, and the core focus of it is ethical and effective leadership. So we'll go into the various theories about ethics, the various political philosophies that exist, the idea of the social contract. We explore that, the idea of the South African Constitution, how does the Constitution work, and how does civil society work. But it's based ultimately on the idea that each person that's participating in the program is going to be ethical, is going to be upright, wants to make a difference in society that's going to be ethical. So we do, for example, focus on the idea of standing up against corruption as an example. So some of the let's say, programs, projects we've taken on has been about basically transparent tendering in the city of Johannesburg, as an example. And this is a project that the fellows in our program get to work on practically. It gives them an opportunity to practicalize their project management skills. They go out, they petition, they speak to ward councillors about basically pushing a bylaw within the city of Johannesburg about transparent tendering. It's one of the projects that we've looked at. But all of this is based on the idea that we should not be taking what isn't ours. And we need to contribute to the larger social benefit of everyone. So ethics is at the core of the program, and naturally effectiveness. Ethics and effectiveness must go to hand in hand. There's no idea. Relying on the idea on the Quran itself, we have the idea of al-qawi and al-amin. So al-qawi to have capacity, and al-amin to be upright and truthful. The two things should go together. It's the idea of being ethical shouldn't be something that's looked at. This is only the religious domain, but the religious domain is not capable. And those that have capability have no ethics. There shouldn't be that type of contradiction.
That's brilliantly put, actually. That's excellent. And to see that you're forging this kind of an understanding in young people. So how do you choose your cohorts or those who enroll in the ASRI program? And where, like if there's young people who are watching this program who say, I want to be in that fellowship program, I want to be mentored in that way, because I know there's a real struggle for mentorship with young people. How do they go about reaching you?
Okay. So firstly, our website, asri.org.za. All our programs are on the website. But let's talk about the Future Leaders Program first. So the Future Leaders Program is essentially a postgraduate program. So the minimum requirement is that a person has had, training in a degree, and they've completed their degree, an undergraduate degree at minimum. Then they can apply for the program. Application process isn't that long. Should, for example, a candidate in the application process, because we screen all 500 to 600 applications that we get yearly, and we look for the best possible candidates. We ask for CVs, and then we follow up with interviews. So around about, say, September is when people should be looking out for the Future Leaders Program applications. And it will be available on our website and on our social media. Now, the Civic Leadership Program, there we've selected essentially schools and universities. Universities, we are working with certain student societies where we've approached them. They, being in partnership with us, essentially then circulate applications to their members. And that's more of an open door policy. But from there, naturally, we are curating and trying to incubate people that are much more serious for a higher level of training. In our high school program, then, selected high schools, we've approached them. The high schools that we approached were very gracious, and then they basically publicized our program to their learners, and learners who are interested and whose parents motivated them, encouraged them, then they joined the program as well.
So is there a potential then to take, exactly as you spoke in the previous segment, the awareness of political duty, if I may put it forward, through ASRI into perhaps one or two schools that you try out? So basically, it should be, what shall I say, like a template that you can start in one of the schools. Say, this is what we're doing. Reach out to the IEC and say, will you support us in this? We want to raise political awareness in these areas. For example, we've identified the school, go to the school, partnership with them, and maybe carry this program forward.
I think that's a very novel idea. That's definitely worth exploring. And it's maybe something, for example, we can tailor-make it around about something, about a very specific project that we want to explore. Naturally, we're open to such ideas and to such engagement. So I do like this. Shukran.
So tell me now, in terms of the elections that just happened, you were a volunteer at the IEC, right? How did you get that position? How do you go about volunteering for the IEC? And what did you notice? Okay.
So because ASRI has been a civil society organization, we have had some collaboration with Defend Our Democracy. And because of such networking, I seen essentially the public announcements by Defend Our Democracy asking for volunteers who want to act as election observers with the IEC. So I wanted to contribute, so then I applied. initially I thought, okay, there'll probably be hundreds of applications. They're going to overlook mine, but I put one in anyway. I did that. I got a positive reply. There was online training that the Defend Our Democracy rolled out for all of its volunteers. It was very professionally done. Even the election information packs that they gave for observers was very well done. And then we were deployed to our various voter districts to observe. We were not allowed, obviously, let's say, to engage the process in voter counting or anything of the sort. Our responsibility was essentially to observe and to record whatever we were observing via Defend Our Democracy's election app, which was all online, and we were doing this throughout the day. And I was fortunate enough that the voter district where I was deployed at, I had the opportunity of staying overnight and watching the counting process take place. It was very long, it was very tedious, but very thorough. And I appreciate that thoroughness. So the 7-8 hours that we spent at night just watching people counting votes, it paid off in the sense that I think the responsibility that was placed on IEC officials, at least what I had seen in my voter district, and that's only really what I can speak about practically, is that they took their responsibility very, very seriously. They counted, they recounted a third count, a fourth count if necessary. They independently tallied their results to make sure that there were no discrepancies between the various election officers that were on site. So all in all, it was a very, very good experience. And as I was sitting there and watching the entire process throughout the day, I thought this would be something worthwhile if my local community could actually put together a team of volunteers who went for IEC training, and come the next election, young men and young women are engaged in the process, and we're not just having a case of outsourcing, let's say, election observation to people from outside communities. These are things that can be done within our communities themselves. So it was really good to see, and I'm happy to have been part of that process.
So we're really nearly at the end now, and we have just about 2 minutes left. If you can perhaps in a nutshell tell us what it is that you feel the youth should be doing and how it is that the youth can take this country forward.
I think that we have to break basically that apathy barrier. Young people need to understand that we are not just going to be the future, we are basically that generation now. We have to be able to honor those that came before us, but also understand we have a responsibility to those who are going to follow us. That going via the route of, let's say, private corporations and privatizing our entire lives is not necessarily going to be the solution for South Africa. We as citizens have to take charge, and we are going to have to be the ones making the difference. So the quicker we become more familiar of how government institutions, civil society institutions, how the private sector works, and how all of them can be essentially harnessed for the public good, the better it is. But we have to choose to be involved. The notion that somebody else is going to do it, or this can only be done online and remotely controlled and problems are solved, we have to break out of that mode of thinking. We need to get onto the ground, apply our minds, but also get moving doing practical work.
So very last question in 30 seconds. Do you think that Muslims are still very apathetic, especially the younger generation, in terms of being involved in the political process? And what is it that they should be doing to come out of that slumber?
I think, and this is where I'm going to speak with my scholarly hat, if you will allow me. I think, unfortunately, we are becoming a little bit more apathetic. Yes, we have global ummatic concerns, if I can call it that, and that's great, mashallah. But we also have to translate all of that energy into local programs. So this means, again, as you spoke about, let's say, active citizenship within the community, generally has to start at a younger age. Within the Muslim community specifically, it needs to start at a younger age. It's unfortunate that in the year 2024, 30 years after democracy in South Africa and the banning of the haram apartheid system, that we still had discussions about whether we should or should not vote as a community. I can respect people's opinion if they don't want to vote. My question will be, okay, you're not going to vote, that's fine for whatever reason, but how do you contribute to society beyond just voting? That's what needs to be inculcated in the South African community, especially amongst young people. For example, we can come out into the streets about Palestine, brilliant, but what are we going to do about food shortages in South Africa and about skill shortages? Those are areas we can contribute to as well.
Thank you so much, Anwar, for your time and for sharing this thought. And I think that's a very powerful question that you leave behind, that as a South African Muslim community, it's fine if you don't want to vote, but how are you going to then translate your particular feelings and emotions into a tangible policy process that will hold the government accountable? Or are you going to live as a citizen in this country without making any meaningful contribution? These are the questions that we should be having, rather whether it's halal or haram to vote. And hopefully we will mature by 2029 or maybe 2026 before the local elections.
Inshallah.
Fi amanillah, wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.